Public Affairs Center. We are beyond elated today to welcome in our midst Ms. Mahadevan. She is Principal Secretary Panchayat Raj. While many of us know her as a seasoned bureaucrat in policy circles, I can confidently claim that she is celebrated equally in academia and among young researchers. So the starting point of the interview today is an editorial I read authored by Ms. Mahadevan, where she mentioned two words, deconcentration and delegation, with respect to the 73rd constitutional amendments. Devolution. You also mentioned how meaningful devolution has not occurred. So, what are some of your observations and recommendations in line with that?
Thank you, Nidhi, and it's a pleasure to be here. I think on decentralization, one of the things that I have written about extensively, one of the things that we need to recognize is that decentralization is a journey. It cannot be, and it was never intended to be, a one-time event. Of course, the constitutional amendment came in the 1990s, it came in 1993. But even before that, Karnataka had already taken the first step in terms of the Panchayat Act. And even after that, Karnataka brought another act, the 1993 Karnataka Gram Swaraj and Panchayat Raj Act, and took many elements from the new constitutional amendment into its own act. For example, women's reservation was 25% in the 80s, but in 1993, Karnataka increased that to 33%. But if you look at the Karnataka Act itself, there have been several other amendments even after that. And women's reservation, to stay with the same example, increased in 2010 to 50%. So now Karnataka has 50% reservation for women. And similarly, I think around 20 or 21 states actually have increased their representation for women to 50%. So the process of continuous reviews, returning to the act, returning to the legislation, and amending it in order to keep it with the spirit of the times continues. This is the first thing. Thereafter, decentralization of different funds, functions, and functionaries. That is a process again. It's not a one-time thing, but it's a journey. And I think there are two things to be kept in mind. One is the fact that our local bodies, rural local bodies, have to have their capacities in place. And there was always this concern that, especially by different departments of the state, that are there enough capacities on the ground, at the grassroots, to devolve further functions. I think there have been moments, such as the recent COVID epidemic, where we have seen in 2 years that amply grassroots local government institutions have shown the capacities to take multi-dimensional challenges, complex challenges like the pandemic, like relief work, like the response, like the spreading science-based awareness and so on, and they've shown their capacities. And therefore, in consonance with that, further decentralization has occurred. Decentralization need not be only in terms of devolution of funds, it can be in terms of increasing the reach of services, increasing the number of services actually institutionally delivered by the panchayats and so on and so forth. And that process will continue. Organically, it will evolve with time. That's what I was referring to.
So, with reference to the 3 F's, the funds, functions, and functions, local finance has always emerged as a point of contention, and tied and untied funds, or more specifically, the unavailability of untied funds, has been a pain point which has been widely discussed. So, the recent budget for the current financial year, it allocates some rupees 25 lakhs for 750 GPs in the state, and it is in the way of untied funds. How would you perceive, how would you want these GPs to use this untied fund for improving outcomes?
That's an interesting question. You ask how I would want these GPs to use these funds, but the whole point of decentralizing being that they should define their own priorities, as I'm sure you understand. But on untied funds itself, and the fact that it's a pain point of having tied and untied funds, and the limited availability of resources, I would say that panchayats today in Karnataka, for example, are getting a decent sized amount by way of finance commission grants. Over and above that, they're getting state finance grants. They also have a fairly large pie in terms of their own tax base and their own source of revenue. In the last 3 years, we have increased collections of current demand to 100%. So we are doing well, and we are trying to increase the property tax base, for which certain steps are being taken as well. In addition to that, Karnataka, for example, uses a large NREGA budget, NREGA budget, and NREGA is such a scheme where typically a panchayat can get 1 crore or 1.5 crores of an NREGA budget and use it in so many flexible ways that it can really come up with an integrated action plan for integrated rural development. Specifically coming to the budget announcement about the 25 lakhs of untied grants, this is a very important scheme of the Honorable Chief Minister called the Amrit Gram Panchayat scheme. And this is interesting because it is given in the old style of, in the 90s we used to talk about integrated rural development. And in some ways we are returning to integrated development of panchayat or a set of panchayats, say 750 panchayats, saturate, do the roads, do the service delivery units, do the Anganwadis, the library, the digital library, do the SAG workshed, do the solid waste management and so on. Ensure that it is complete rather than spreading the resources thin so that no panchayat achieves saturation in these services. And this, I think, is a very interesting and important way to proceed. That was the intention. So I think the panchayat definitely should prioritize, for which we are there to give it training and orientation. It should prioritize based on certain important parameters such as we have introduced disability budgeting, we have introduced gender and child budgeting. So it should prioritize for its physical infrastructure, but it should also prioritize, and I think it will, for its social infrastructure. And that's the intention of these grants.
Another key budget announcement was that the registration of births and deaths or vital statistics would be transferred to Gram Panchayats. Do you foresee any challenges by way of functional or financial capacity?
I think rather than challenges, I think there will I see this as a tremendous opportunity. There will of course be some additional administrative issues to be resolved in terms of technical integration of the e-Janna birth and death registration e-governance platform with the Panchayat service delivery platform. That process is already initiated. And there will be some training to be given in terms of how birth and death registration to happen, what is the process, what is the credible data on which this has to be done. But more importantly, I think this is an opportunity, and this is an important role that the Gram Panchayat can play to ensure that every birth and every death that takes place in the rural areas is formally registered, which I think is an important step forward in ensuring that the civil registration system also is maintained in a healthy and functionally at its efficient best, but also in terms of ensuring that children born in the state, for example, all children should get their entitlements, but the entitlements will begin to accrue only when their births are registered, and therefore this is an important issue in terms of providing people their basic rights.
I would also like to ask about some pandemic-specific repercussions that might have unfolded in the state. So, primary and secondary education feature prominently in the list of constitutional deliverables of the rural local body. Now, with the pandemic and with migrants moving homewards and with school closures, studies like those conducted by Azim Premji University found that there were substantial learning losses and also regression. What were some of the efforts that the state anchored to address these issues?
So I think Karnataka, you're absolutely right. There has been a tremendous impact on children and students due to the closure of schools and colleges. Karnataka pioneered a very innovative neighborhood school concept called Vidyagama from the education department, where teachers made physical visits, not into classrooms but into neighborhood areas, teaching areas, where small little learning circles were set up among the children and activities were given and so on. In addition, what we thought we could do, and RDPR department supported, was that we found Gram Panchayats were playing a tremendous role in the COVID response. They were doing wonderful work on science-based awareness dissemination. They were doing effective COVID management. They were doing relief. They were doing livelihood work with NGNREGA. So we felt that similarly we should set up a Gram Panchayat education task force, bringing together Panchayat members, the Panchayat staff, as well as the teachers, high school, primary school teachers, librarian, the rehabilitation worker, and so on, and even two school children, a high school student, a boy and a girl from high school, into a task force to provide support to children while they were affected by school closures. This could range from providing a television for children who are, because not all rural children have access to television. And while the department was screening lessons on television, it's important that all children get access to a clean and safe place where they can catch those lessons and make notes. So this was one of the things. Another thing that we said was that the Gram Panchayat can provide learning space for the Vidyagama neighborhood schools. We also said that Gram Panchayat must take up a survey, house-to-house survey, and we did, of 81 lakh rural families. A house-to-house survey was conducted of finding out where every child was, whether the child was enrolled in the Anganwadi or in the school or not. And the concerned departments, education department, WCG department, were informed with the list, panchayat-wise, of those children who had not yet been enrolled. This was also an important part of what panchayats did. But I think one of our most important interventions, and one that's very close personally to my heart, was that we have 5,600 rural public libraries. And we felt that while schools and Anganwadis and colleges are closed, why not open up these libraries, set up vibrant children's sections, renovate these libraries and provide computers, provide a reading environment. Until it's safe to actually sit there and read, let children borrow books, take books home, give them free membership, but when it's safe to sit and read, let children come, increase the working hours. So this is what we managed to do. We upgraded 2,100 libraries with computers and internet to digital libraries, in addition to their books. We further renovated another 2,600 libraries with buildings and paint and furniture, places for children to read. Because one of the things that we hadn't realized so far was that for rural girls, sometimes even sitting and getting 2 hours of quiet time to read is an important, and it's a big challenge. And rural girls were informing us, continuously sharing with us that this is a safe space for us. Library is like a sanctuary for us. So that was very moving. But I think the biggest success, and of course we got huge donations. We got civil society organizations like the Premji Foundation, CWC, Pratham Books, Shikshana Foundation, giving us books, lakhs of books, and Android TVs, devices, computers, and so on. But the most important success really in my mind has been that we have been able to enroll 14 lakh children, rural children, free of cost, as members in the libraries. And now children are coming to the libraries, even on Saturdays and Sundays, to sit and read, to borrow books, to maybe even to do their homework. They need not do anything else. They can just bring their homework, sit at the table, and finish their homework. Sometimes their schools may not be having benches for them to sit on, but there's a table and a chair waiting for them in the library. And that was one of our very special moments when we were able to do this.
So were these revelations that you've been talking about rural public libraries, were they done in convergence with MG and REG?
No, not MGNREGA specifically, because there's no specific provision for rural libraries. But panchayats had their own funds, their own sources of revenue. In Karnataka, we also have what is called a library cess. We are one of the few states to have a library act and a library cess. But additionally, panchayats also were able to use their untied funds. We also had convergence of Taluk Panchayat and Zilla Panchayat funds in many places. Books came from Zilla Panchayats and also from foundations. We have had tremendous goodwill of foundations like Shikshana, Azim Premji Foundation, Pratham Books, CWCs, BGVS, different partners, organizations across the state, but also local communities, and that was the most heartwarming thing, that we had something called a Pustaka Jolige, which was a procession. Idea was that even though it's a government program, let's make it into a community program. So we had little processions going from house to house, saying that we've come to your house. In Kannada we say, "Now nimma mane bagalige, nimma unga pustaka nama jolige," which means we've come to your house, to your doorstep. Give us one book for our book bag. And we found people giving books in hundreds and thousands. That was really the most surprising and heartwarming thing, because one tends to think that this is not a generation which reads. But there were thousands and thousands of books coming to us, not only from Bangalore, but from remote rural taluks where these processions would go. And the villages would invite people, saying, "Come to our village, come to our street." And in one village, they actually brought a band set and they invited the procession. So that was really nice.
So, ma'am, on the question of MGNREGA, the budget also, I think, envisages stronger convergence with other schemes in terms of MGNREGA. But it has received scathing remarks in the past of not creating productive assets or just playing with money. What is your perception of works undertaken under MGNREGA in the state?
According to me, the most important asset created by MGNREGA is invisible. It is in creating that invisible social safety net, which actually helps people to stay healthy and stay with a livelihood, live with dignity in the most difficult times. So that is an asset which is not visible in so many ways. But the very fact that people are there, living their lives, managing their livelihoods, and have not suffered greater hardship than they would have, is testament to the importance of MGNREGA. But also, I think in terms of creating sustainable assets, Karnataka is a state which has done tremendous work on MGNREGA. We have constructed 3,000 Anganwadis with MGNREGA convergence. We have constructed hundreds of school compound walls, kitchen sheds, playgrounds for children, a holistic school atmosphere with MGNREGA. We have found places where parents of children are participating in creating the compound wall for the schools where their own children are studying. I can't think of a more holistic and integrated approach to rural livelihoods. In addition, in a state like Karnataka, which has the second largest drought-prone area in Karnataka, in the country, tremendous amount of work of MGNREGA on water conservation, creating water conservation structures, restoring tanks, restoring kalyanis, and ensuring that water tables don't decline as rapidly as they would otherwise. And the final most important role of MGNREGA has been in actually helping individual farmers. Because individual farmers, small marginal farmers, land holdings, taking an integrated approach for vermicomposting, horticulture, cattle sheds, poultry sheds, goat sheds, and so on, helping the whole farmer rather than, again, creating silos, and helping the whole farmer to integrate all their requirements. MGNREGA has been changing lives continuously. I think that's a very great part of the scheme.
So, ma'am, you mentioned the role of NGOs in crowdfunding certain resources such as books in the case of the pandemic and school closures. How else do you think, where else do you think NGOs should step in, especially in terms of collaborating with the government and policy making?
I think there are two very, very important roles. One is in implementation. Implementation at scale is always the question before the government. But when we implement at scale, we as administrators know that there is a transmission loss and we lose in terms of quality. And in ensuring that quality is not lost, quality is maintained on the ground. This is the role of small distributed civil society organizations on the ground. We have hundreds and thousands of them working in Karnataka, and they work very closely because I was the nodal officer for CSO engagement. They work very closely with our team all across the districts and in Bangalore on COVID response, on relief, on different kinds of challenges, vaccination, livelihoods, various kinds of things during the COVID response. And I think that role is always there. A partnership between the state working at scale and small civil society organizations working on the ground to ensure that scale does not result in dilution of quality. In policy, I think NGOs bring very, very sharp skill sets, very detailed knowledge, the ability to study an issue on the field in its context without the urgency that sometimes pushes government preoccupations into less important but more urgent issues. And therefore, that granular knowledge and supported with good theoretical framework and academic research and review of literature and so on can be very important, because in government we are always multitasking and facing so many challenges that we don't have the time to reflect often because we're rushing from one challenge to another. So there again, NGOs have a tremendous role in advising and helping and even advocating for policy reforms.
So in the same vein, it'd be prudent to mention that Ms. Mahadevan is now on the board of Public Affairs Center. So where do you see our NGO in the next 5 years?
First of all, it's a great honor to be on the board of the Public Affairs Center. It's an organization I've admired for its work and for its tireless championing of transparency and accountability in governance. The Public Affairs Index is one of the most widely respected metrics of government performance, and it's always interesting and exciting to wait for the findings. I think the Public Affairs Sector brings a whole history and a whole institutional tradition of studying governance, analyzing it from the perspective of citizens on the ground, analyzing it with very rigorous intellectual traditions, and bringing workable solutions to the table. Sitting with governments to bring workable, detailed, granular solutions, affordable and appropriate, culturally appropriate solutions to the table, which are discussed, which are taken forward, and which are greeted with both respect and with seriousness. That's important. And I think even from today's discussions, we've had, as you know, a detailed set of presentations today on the kind of work that Public Affairs Center is engaging with in these recent months. I think the kind of studies that are being taken up now will be very valuable for the state, and the partnerships that are being forged now will stand in very good stead to improve the lives of people, especially women and children and marginalized communities in the state in years to come.
And I'm sure our analysis will also benefit greatly from your intellectual inputs. We look forward to our association with you, and so it's been great to have you in our midst, and I'm sure we've had more to think of than we came with. Thank you so much for joining us.